policy. I can talk about that. I think I can answer the question without talking about this case.
You can talk about some things relative to the investigation, but not others. We want all the answers to what's going on here.
I will tell you, with respect to the body-worn camera policy, the Department of Justice announced that policy when it was announced, as we have communicated to your staff and you. It was announced that it would be phased implementation. ATF is implementing that policy. We've implemented it in just under a third of our field divisions. We have not received 3 separate requests for program funding from Congress to do so, but we are still doing it. I watched a hearing a couple of weeks ago where your fellow chairman...
Did the Little Rock police officers who accompanied you on this raid, did they wear body cams?
Again, not commenting on this specific case, but in general, the Department of Justice written policy allows local law enforcement on these types of operations, short-term operations, to follow their own guidelines and policies, if they wish, in body-worn cameras. And what I wanted to say is...
Their policy was to wear them. They weren't wearing them that day. We want to know why. Did you tell them not to wear them?
Mr. Chairman, again, it is simply unfair at this point while there's a pending investigation.
It's a simple question. We just want to know why they weren't following the rules. Their rules say wear body cameras. Your rules say wear body cameras. You weren't wearing body cameras. I go back to my original question. What were you trying to hide? We saw the video where you walked up and you put the tape on the doorbell. We know there were no lights to the foyer area. We have Mrs. Malinowski here who can testify to that. And we know you weren't wearing body cameras. What were you hiding?
Again, Mr. Chairman, we're not hiding anything. And with respect to the body-worn camera policy, the people there...
Why on the 12th did you not go and search the home? You were all circled up, ready to go, but a week before, on the 12th of March, you don't go, you go on the 19th. Why'd you decide not to go on the 12th?
Mr. Chairman, these operations, and by the way, we do about 11,000 operations each year. They're very dangerous operations. ATF doesn't do anything that is not dangerous. Well, it's not quite true, but many of them are very, very dangerous. And those operations are handled by people with decades of law enforcement experience. They plan them, they look at things.
Director, you got to admit, this is a little unique. You got a citizen, the highest paid official in the municipal government, Little Rock, Arkansas, making $260,000 a year, running the airport, no criminal background history, nothing, and he's dead at a pre-dawn raid when it sure looks like you could have served this search warrant when he wasn't there, but you decided not to. You decided to wait till he was home when you did it on March 19th. And as a result, Mr. Malinowski is no longer with us.
Well, first of all, let me just say this, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, any time that there's a loss of life, that is a profound incident. And of course, on behalf of just myself, ATF, and all law enforcement, we are very sorry when those things happen. Also, an agent was shot that day, and I'm sure you are sorry that that occurred also.
Of course, all the more reason to follow the no-knock warrant, not to have a no-knock warrant take place and follow the rules.
Mr. Chairman, as somebody who has worked with law enforcement for decades, there's a great temptation when a horrible incident happens to prejudge. Sometimes people even try to use it to advance agendas. The cops who are in the field and the family
I just want the answers. My time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Johnson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dettelbach, thank you for your service. Many of my colleagues and I have been strong proponents and supporters of the use of body cameras and funding for those cameras. And so, in some ways, it's rather surprising to read that Chairman Jordan recently criticized you, he just did it today, about body cameras and what happened to them, why they were not being worn. But meanwhile, House Republican Appropriations Committee Chair Hal Rogers just last month criticized your budget request for its department-wide emphasis on equipping federal agents with body cameras. Is there anything in response that you would like to say to Chairman Jordan, who supports the use of body cameras, versus Chairman Rogers, who wants to defund the use of body cameras.
Well, it's not my position to get in the middle of two chairs, but I will say this. Anybody, Chairman Jordan or anybody, we've been implementing this policy for several years. Anybody who wants to support it, I welcome to the effort.
And we need to fund it. And let me just move on, because there's been allegations that this gentleman who the chairman just discussed, Mr. Malinowski, suggesting that he was just a hobbyist. You know, we call him an unlicensed gun dealer, but they say he was a hobbyist and a firearms enthusiast. In your opinion, is someone who buys and then almost immediately resells at least 150 firearms over a 3-year period a hobbyist or an unlicensed gun dealer? Are they a hobbyist or an unlicensed gun dealer?
My opinion and your opinion and others' opinions are not what counts. What counts is the federal judge's opinion, who reviewed the search warrant affidavit here and found probable cause that 2 separate federal laws had been violated relating to unlawful firearms acquisition and dealing. And in that affidavit, which is public, some of the things that are set forth are that Mr. Malinowski had not obtained a license, that he obtained about 150 firearms in the period prior to this incident, that he sold a good number of them, some 1 day after he had obtained them, that one of those firearms was found on the person of a 15-year-old Norteño gang member in California. Another was sold in the backseat of a car in Little Rock to a convicted robber. Others were found on a drug dealer in California, a kilo of marijuana, other drugs in the back, baggy scales consistent with distribution. And so, respectfully, these are not victimless crimes, and it is up to Congress and the judge to make that determination. Those agents were present pursuant to the terms of a federally judicially approved warrant. The time they were there was approved. The day they were there was approved.
Let me ask you this. Do you have any idea how many unlicensed gun dealers, just like Mr. Malinowski, are operating in this country, selling multiple tens of hundreds of firearms yearly?
I don't. We can get back to you with we recently published a national firearms trafficking report that talked about the fact that the percentage of people who are trafficking in this manner has now grown to be the #1 way that people are unlawfully dealing firearms. So 40% of all our criminal trafficking cases deal with the notion of people engaged in the business of dealing without a license. That has grown over time.
Okay, let me get this question in. You know, prior to your confirmation in 2022, there had been a 7-year lapse between confirmed ATF directors to the time when you were confirmed. And during that 7-year period, the crime rate and violent crime rate in the country went.
ATF agents and police officers who are out there risking their lives. But thank you for saying this, but it really is them who's doing the work.
Well, without leadership, it's hard to get things done, and I thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
And with that, I yield back.
Everybody is sorry that this occurred.
Yeah, look at her, don't look at me.
It doesn't mean that, I'm trying to also speak into the microphone. It doesn't mean that we can adjudicate this here today. There's an investigation going on. But of course, everybody, and everybody feels bad. I'm sure that a federal agent was shot, not shot at, shot that day. Those things are hard facts for all of us.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to enter something into the record. Your testimony, you say guns are the leading cause of death for children in the U.S. Not according to Snoops. It's a far-left publication. It is traffic crashes. Could I have that entered into the record?
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you so very much. I was a sheriff, 8 years as in law enforcement, 30, conducted a lot of search warrants. My agency, I would not allow for no-knocks. Just didn't allow it because what we've seen over the past several years, when you have these SWAT teams looking like ninjas coming to doors at 6 o'clock in the morning. It just could cause some problems. You stated in your testimony just a few minutes ago, 11,000 of these a year. Very dangerous, done with very experienced agents, right? What policies do you have when you are going to execute search warrants, arrest warrants, to mitigate risk? Mitigate risk.
Yeah, Congressman, first of all, we do a very, very thorough job of training, which is, of course, as you know, as a sheriff, very important. Second, we have operations planning. We have review of the operation.
Executing a search warrant pre-dawn, early in the morning, knowing people are going to be in bed. How does that mitigate risk? Especially when you do it and it's a no-knock.
So Congressman, as a former sworn sheriff, I assume you would agree with me that police are entitled to due process also.
I tell you what it appears to me is what I've seen from the federal government, whether it's ATF or the FBI, doing search warrants or arrest warrants on J6ers, going in there with flashbangs, with the big Bearcats. I had a Bearcat, I know what it is. And having agents come out looking like they're ninja turtles for combat. I think not only are you scaring the hell out of the entire neighborhood, but when you kick down or break down a door and you don't even announce who you are, what do you think is going to happen? This was Mr. Malinowski there to try to protect his family. He didn't know. If you would have called him, sir, had a casual conversation, were you aware that he had no criminal history?
Sheriff?
I just want to ask a question. Are you aware, did you know the gentleman had no criminal history? No prior?
Am I aware sitting here?
Yes. Were you aware of it?
In firearms trafficking cases, and people who are dealing without a license and buying 150
I'm sure there are a lot of bad hombres out
would
there.
not have a criminal.
I'm trying to focus on Mr. Malinowski. Were you personally aware that he didn't have a criminal history?
Again, I'm trying to answer your question directly.
Obviously, it's quite clear you weren't. Quite clear you weren't. And I want to talk about mitigating risk, but were your agents wearing body cameras that day?
Again, I've tried to say this. I'd like a chance to answer this. The entire field division that covers Arkansas had not yet been phased in.
You have a budget. Try to convince the American people you don't have the do-re-mi to put body cameras on your agents that are conducting 11,000 warrants. These are dangerous. You've got 11,000 of them out there, and you had a budget last year of $1.672 billion with a B. And you're telling me, I'm sorry, folks, I can't provide this transparency to the American people. I can't because I don't have the budget to do so. The American people, there's a problem right now with law enforcement out there. And I have the picture and the image of every law enforcement officer that's been killed in the past 3.5 years. And there's way too many. There's way too many on my wall.
We agree.
And so we have body-worn cameras. And why do we do that? Because there is a lack of trust between the police and the communities they serve. So when you provide these cameras, there's no he said, she said. It's all on record. And you didn't have your body cameras on that day. I'm telling you, it stinks to high heaven. I highly recommend you cooperate with this committee and you try to explain, other than this, I don't have the money to do so and I'm phasing it in. Buddy, you got to get your priorities, reshuffle your priorities and get your priorities in order. And I highly recommend you get body cameras on every one of those individuals that are searching these warrants, because it seems like there's a cover up here. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California, Mr. Cray, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this most important hearing. Mr. Director Dittelbach, thank you for being here today. Ms. Malinowski, I just want to say prayers are with you, with your family in this very difficult moment. I hope beyond the heated debate that we're having here today, we actually come up with better public policies to minimize the loss of life in these public safety enforcement actions. I also, Mr. Dittelbach, would like to know what's it going to take to get those body cameras out in the field. What's it going to do?
We have them across a third of the United States having received no program increase at all. And we take that money and we balance it with stopping gangs that are killing people, stopping cartels, as Chairman Rogers pointed out with, that are the most dangerous organizations in the world, going after trigger pullers, homicide cases, carjackings. So we have made programmatic requests that are open to the public. $13 million in 2023, 37 million,
How
0.8.
fast can we get them out to the other two-thirds that don't
Right,
have
I'm
the
saying
body?
we have a pending request for a programmatic increase of $37.8 million. It's the same request we made
How long
last
do you
year that
think
was
it's going
not
to take
given.
to implement? How long will this take to implement?
Currently, with what we have now, without anything else, we will be implemented across the country by end of 2026. If there's more resources, we can try to speed that up. But it's
I,
not
as a
just
member of Congress, hope I'm speaking for a few folks here, hope that we can, expedite body cams being worn by our agents out there. This is an important issue. Love to work with you however we can to make sure that happens. And if I may, I'm going to ask you my first question, which is, how do you guys work with state, local, international agencies to protect our public?
Congressman.
You were out in Orange County recently, my part of the town.
I was, and we there got to recognize work of the Orange County Violent Crime Task Force, which is a great example of how we work shoulder to shoulder with a variety of local police departments. And what we do is we target the worst of the worst. So there was a case out there I remember hearing about. It was a series of Hobbs Act robberies that resulted in the death and murder of clerks at 7-Elevens, I believe. And that's a case where we partnered with local law enforcement. And ATF has a little bit of a different way of doing this. If the most appropriate punishment is in the state courts and it's murder, that's fine with us. We're not looking for necessarily only federal cases. We look to do the
Directly,
case.
let me interrupt you. I've got a couple
Sure, of
more
course.
questions here. August 22nd, I sent you a letter requesting your help, your partnership, specifically on a gun buyback program, voluntary gun buyback program that we implement in my district. Didn't get the support there, and I think it's important because this is a program where citizens voluntarily show up, free market, here's $200, here's a weapon I had at home that I haven't touched in 40 years. Yet ATF, have you been working on those, or what is it that we can do to get you to work with us on those very successful programs?
So with those programs, and I think, of course, we value public safety and we value state and local agencies' determinations of what protects them. With respect to gun buyback programs, that's usually a decision and a program run by the state and local agencies, not the federal agencies.
We need your help in executing those.
Well, sometimes agencies can and do apply for burn grant money that can support their comprehensive plans, but ATF does not get involved in the actual operation of gun buyback programs. That is done by state and local authorities.
We'll talk some more later, but I do think these are important programs. You get guns off the street, guns that people don't want anymore. They'd rather have $100, $200 in their hand as opposed to a weapon. Cost effective, nobody gets hurt, and we do need your help. It's local, but we need ATF's database to make sure when those guns are brought back, we can run them through a database to see if they've been involved in any crimes, to make sure that those are guns that we can take off the street without destroying evidence. Go ahead, sir. I've got 20
Congressman, thank
seconds.
you. We will work with you. I commit to you that we will get back to you and your staff on that.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield the rest of my time.
I thank the gentleman. I recognize myself now. Director, you accused a dead man of a crime of illegally selling in the back seat a weapon. Would I hear that correctly?
Respectfully, what I did was talked about the public search warrant affidavit that was filed
No.
and proved
I
by the judge.
I understand, but you're standing by your search warrant. You're standing by the fact that in the search warrant, you're alleging that he had committed a crime. Is that correct?
Chairman, respectfully, I was making the point that a federal
No,
magistrate...
you're not being respectful. Answer the question. The question is, did you allege that he had committed a felony, a crime, in your affidavit?
The judge did find that.
Okay. Well, I'll take that as the judge found it because you alleged it. So you alleged a crime, but you didn't seek to arrest him, did you? Did you have an arrest warrant for Mr. Malinowski?
My understanding, now,
That's a yes or no, Director.
my understanding is that there was not an arrest warrant. I don't have the full investigative file, but that is
Okay,
my understanding.
You came here, you knew we were going to ask, you saw yesterday, and now you're playing one of the games that the chairman and I didn't like during Fast and Furious. We don't like it now. If you want to be back here again, because you can't seem to know what you should know, what Mrs. Malinowski deserves to know, if some group of 10 carloads of people showed up and kicked in a door in the dark of night, and somebody came and shot at them, we wouldn't be talking about somebody getting shot in the toe. We'd be talking exclusively about a planned murder of somebody who may or may not be armed, but who had every right to have weapons in their home, an expectation they had weapons in their home, an expectation that they might use it. All of that, you don't have to be ATF to know. So let's go back on track here again. If you had a belief that he had committed a crime, and if your intent was to arrest him, then that would explain why a week earlier you've called off an already authorized search, because you were only going to search for the weapons, you weren't going to search for him. Isn't that correct?
Respectfully, Mr. Chairman, I am not able and will not. It's not fair to do this during the pendency of a criminal investigation.
No, look, it's always, I'm sorry, but DOJ and you guys, it's always, you can go on forever. Hunter Biden's over. Why didn't you do a no-knock on him at his home with the vice president?
To be clear, this isn't our investigation. We in the Little Rock Police asked an outside investigation be conducted by the Arkansas State Police. It's their investigation. The district attorney is going to review that.
And I hope they appropriately find that in spite of qualified immunity, that you blew it badly enough that, in fact, criminal charges should be considered.
I hope they just find whatever the truth is.
What is the penalty for the crime alleged on the affidavit for selling a weapon not as a licensed dealer? What's the penalty?
Oh, my Lord. Mr. Chairman, I believe it's a 10-year felony, and there are two different crimes. It might be a 5-year and a 10-year felony.
Okay.
I want to get back to you to make sure that there's a series of statutes that run all in a row there. I want to make sure I'm not mixing up the statute.
5 years or it's 10 years. It's not a death penalty. Is that correct?
There is not a death penalty for that statute, no.
Okay. So Mr. Malinowski was not in any danger of being executed for what he is alleged to have done and no longer can defend himself because he's dead. But he was killed doing what any normal citizen does when people enter their home in the dark of night and they don't know who they are. If you had body cameras, maybe Mrs. Malinowski didn't hear right. Maybe you said police and identified yourself. Maybe he said, I don't care, and maybe he fired the shots. I don't believe that, and I don't think you do either. I believe he had every real belief that he was defending his wife and family. He fired warning shots, a ricochet hit a police officer or an ATF agent, and you killed him. Those are the facts. I have been investigating ATF for many years. And ATF agents have, rightfully so, and with great trepidation, I'm sure, come forth and been our whistleblowers. And we've consistently seen there are two ATF, need and want and deserve, and the one that plays fast and loose, like 10 cars going in deliberately with a warrant that did not entitle an arrest, when in fact, if you wanted to arrest him, it would have been reasonable to arrest him at work and simultaneously go into his home. If you had done that, he'd be alive today, and we'd be talking about other things, including whether you acted legally. With that, I yield back and recognize Ms. Scanlon for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Director, for your testimony here today. The ranking member mentioned that every single day, 120 Americans are shot and killed, and more than 200 are wounded with gunfire. Those numbers aren't statistics. Every one is an American with a family and neighbors and friends. Yesterday morning at 8:30 a.m., a gunman killed 2 people and injured 3 others at a small family-owned business in Chester, Pennsylvania, right down the street from my office. 5 people were shot. Their coworkers and community were traumatized just for showing up at work in the morning. This unrelenting, unnecessary daily toll of gun violence is hitting families in every corner of every community across our country. Yesterday, it happened in Chester, a post-industrial city that straddles Interstate 95, which is known in law enforcement as the Iron Pipeline, because it's the route that gun traffickers regularly use to smuggle weapons from states with weak gun laws to states with stricter ones. The senseless violence is outrageous, but it's not inevitable. There are things we can do. This violence is enabled by lawmakers who choose to do nothing, who block legislation in the wake of tragedy after tragedy, while the American people are crying out for real action. Whenever Democrats try to explore how Congress can act to stem this uniquely American carnage, our Republican colleagues say the solution is to enforce the laws that are already on the books. But here we are once again in a hearing in which Republicans are attacking ATF, the law enforcement agency charged with primary responsibility for enforcing gun safety laws across our country. And it comes while our Republican colleagues have bills to abolish ATF and have succeeded in getting cuts to its budget. So, Director Dettelbach, I want to turn our focus to what might be real solutions and your agency's role in helping to implement them. You spoke in your testimony about 1,000% increase in ghost guns linked to crimes over the past 5 years. Whenever I speak to our local law enforcement, including last night, they talk to me about how worried they are about the rapid proliferation of ghost guns. Ghost gun recoveries increased by over 400% in Philadelphia between 2019 and 2021. Our Delaware County Police busted a gun trafficker who was building and testing ghost guns in an apartment across the street from our county courthouse. And our Montgomery County Police recently busted a whole ghost gun trafficking ring. These fully functioning, untraceable firearms can be bought without a background check. They can be ordered online and in less than an hour become a firearm as deadly as any sold by a gun dealer. And that's why they've become, as you noted, the weapon of choice for people who might be otherwise barred from purchasing a gun, for criminals. So am I correct that ghost guns look like regular guns and shoot like regular guns and kill like regular guns?
You are.
Okay. Now, can you explain why they're posing such a danger to the American public and why ATF determined it was necessary to issue a rule amending the definition of frame or receiver to ensure that ghost guns are treated like other equally lethal firearms under our laws?
Congresswoman, the reason is, as you said, under our laws. Under the Gun Control Act, Congress specifically provided that items that were readily convertible to being operable firearms should be treated as firearms. The market was out there producing items that were readily convertible, and they were being sold without background checks. I did myself. I took one of these kits and put the gun together. My spouse will tell you not that handy around the house, but it was very easy for me to make a firearm, take it to the range, and fire it. These are firearms that shoot and wound and kill like firearms that are sold in the traditional manner. Congress anticipated that problem. The market changed, and we issued a rule to make sure that Congress's statute was appropriately enforced.
And we appreciate that, given the constant innovation that we see from gun manufacturers and those who seek to evade the existing laws. If we were to wait for Congress to catch up all the time, we'd be in a lot of trouble. Chairman, I would ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter from ATF's Acting Deputy Assistant Director for Public and Governmental Affairs, in which he responded to your letter regarding the execution of the search warrant on Mr. Malinowski's residence and about ATF's compliance with DOJ's body-worn camera policy.
Without objection.
Okay, just so you're aware of which letter it is, it's the one May 21st that responded to your request, which you referenced earlier.
Without objection.
Thank you, and it discusses the funding necessary.
You got it. The
Got it. I yield back.
gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the ATF has a final rule. I think the comments and the rule itself accumulate to about 466 pages that define who is engaged in the business of firearms dealing. So how many firearms does someone have to sell to be engaged in the business of firearm dealing?
Congressman, as you know, that matter is being litigated in several courts. So sticking to what's already in the public record, the rule itself is 16 pages, skipping lines. And there's about, as you say, over 400 pages of explanation.
Yeah.
And so there are factors that are conduct-based, not numerical-based, but conduct-based. We received many comments. One of the comments that we received was from, I think, Senator Cornyn, who expressed a view that there was no numerical threshold. Others had a different view.
Yeah. In the House Judiciary Committee, we probably won't look to Senator Cornyn as the oracle of all things gun rights. But, so you're saying there really is no number?
I'm saying that Congress, our job is to implement the statute that Congress writes.
Yeah, no, but
Congress
just like for a
didn't
regular person that one form or another acquires guns, and they're trying to figure out how many of these guns do I sell before I have to register as a dealer? What you're saying is there is no bright line there.
I'm saying that there's now more information than ever in the form of that rule for specific conduct-based.
I think just for a regular person, more information than ever is probably less helpful than if you sell 3 guns, you're not a dealer, and if you sell 4 guns, then you are a dealer, right? And this rule that you guys have drafted, it's currently enjoined, right? It has no effect.
There are 3 cases that I know of, maybe more going on now. One of the judges has issued equitable relief.
A judge has stopped the implementation of this law for 3 reasons. One is that there's no minimum requirement, and the court has found, this court in Texas, that you aren't just giving effect and life to Congress's statutes. You've in fact exceeded your authority, because Congress would have never allowed some sort of sliding scale where 16 pages of single-spaced whatever determines whether or not you're a firearm dealer, not how many guns you sell. There's a second reason that court in Texas said that this would not have effect, and it's that actual profit is not a requirement of the statute, only the predominant intent for profit. How do you understand that ruling?
Again, that's in litigation. The Department of Justice's positions on each and every one of these matters is public. It is laid out in many, many pages of briefing. And so I would ask people to look at our briefs that we filed in the court, and I would commend your attention to them.
If someone's just trying to figure out whether or not they have to get a federal license or be subject to your guys breaking their potentially killing them, you would think that you'd want that to be easily understandable. And here, even if someone isn't turning a profit, but they might want to turn a profit, they could be subject to this regulation, and the court found that troubling. And then the third reason the court identified is that your rule doesn't just give meaning to Congress's statute, but that, quote, arbitrarily eviscerates the safe harbor provision. So there's a safe harbor provision of this law that says if you're just engaged in the occasional sale or exchange or purchase of a firearm for a personal collection or a hobby, that this regulatory structure wouldn't affect you. But what the court is saying here in blocking your rule is that you have eviscerated the safe harbor that exists for the hobbyist. Do you have a reaction to that ruling?
Again, yes, our position is not that, but it's under litigation. We have filed extensive.
I know, but here we
briefs on
are.
this.
Make your argument. Well, I mean, they're sitting here in court trying to figure out what Congress means. What we're saying is there should definitely be a bright line in terms of guns. You shouldn't have to have this pondering question about profit motive, and you shouldn't eviscerate the safe harbor. That's what we're saying. So what's your argument as to why the safe harbor should be eviscerated?
Our argument is to look to the statute that Congress wrote. The statute that Congress wrote, and I just want to make clear that people understand this, there was an earlier comment about the word livelihood. That is not in the law anymore that Congress wrote. Congress took that out of the law. It doesn't exist anymore. So we start with the statute. That's where things always begin and end, Congressman.
I know you started with the statute, but what this court is saying is that you have exceeded the statute. You've done it in a way that eviscerates the safe harbor, that blurs the lines, and that creates no discernible way for people to comply with the law. And the reason I think you guys are doing that is you want to make it more difficult for people to engage in the legal, lawful, and constitutionally contemplated manner to transfer firearms, and you're trying to criminalize an entire enterprise. And that's why you see us trying to curtail some of your funding and your authorities. I see my time's expired, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Georgia is recognized. Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Director Dettelbach. Thank you for coming before the Judiciary Committee again. I really appreciate it. I know that the work that you do really saves lives. I know that, and it protects our communities and helps many of us sleep a little bit better at night, and me in particular, as well as many of my colleagues here. We do truly understand that the ATF plays a pivotal role in preventing gun violence by removing gun traffickers, ensuring that only lawful and abiding gun owners can purchase firearms, and assisting law enforcement at every level in solving gun crimes. And this committee has had many field hearings on victims of violent crimes. And well, it's ATF's job to do so, to do that very thing, to bring our perpetrators to that are violent crimes, to bring them to justice. The most logical thing for us to do today is find ways to support you, to support ATF's mission to reduce violent gun crimes. We should not defund, or we should not abolish the ATF, the very agency that's actually eliminating any semblance of need for victims of violent crime hearing anywhere in this country. And today we need to hear from you, Director, if you can just tell us, we need to find out from you how we can actually assist you and support the ATF and its mission to reduce illegal firearm use and purchases, eliminate firearm threats, and protect our families, our friends, and our fellow Americans. Director Dettelbach, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the most significant gun safety legislation that we've had in almost 30 years, has made tremendous progress. And I've been monitoring the progress of this package of work in eliminating gun violence as a public health crisis. And the initiatives that have been set forth in this law include parts of my plan for the implementation of extremist protection orders, those programs, and also laws that ensure that firearms are not in the hands of those in court who have been found through the due process to be a danger to themselves or to the community. And then also funding for community violence interventions in that package of work as well, and working to close the gun show loophole. But my colleagues, Director Dettelbach, have touched on how ATF cuts have affected state and local law enforcement. But would you like to expand on that for us? Because this is really important and critical information that I think the country really needs to hear.
Protecting Americans from violent crime is at the core of everything we do at ATF. And that means that so many of our strategies and resources depend on supporting local law enforcement, sheriff's departments, police departments, state police. I go and meet with those folks everywhere I go all the time. And the things that we do help them to close homicide cases, arrest gang members, get carjackers in Philadelphia off the street, stop the southbound flow of firearms through our 9 trafficking strike forces on the border to the cartels that present a danger to public safety in all those towns, for all those sheriffs across the border. We do all of those things every day, and on top of it, our CJICs, our Crime Gun Intelligence Centers, which are being put up all over the country, are places where local, state, federal agents sit together, often with prosecutors, and evaluate violent crime cases in real time so that the next morning we can be out on the streets investigating the most violent people. Budget cuts make all of that less and harder. Everybody wants a CJIC. We can't give everybody a CJIC because we don't have enough money for that. And if we cut more money, we're cutting those crime gun intelligence centers that lead to operations that day, the next week, that get violent criminals off the street.
So am I correct in understanding then that you need full support and funding of the ATF?
Yes, not just me, the agents who are out there risking their lives need and deserve that support.
And might I say, being a mother who lost her son to gun violence, I will tell you that law enforcement worked very hard on our behalf. I know they do this work every single day, and I'm just really grateful for the ATF. I'm grateful for the law enforcement. I am grateful for those that are on the front lines every single day doing everything that you express, because it's vital, it's necessary, and this is a public health crisis. And thank you for the work that you're doing and all the agents and people that work with you to keep our community safe. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Thank you, sir. Director, have you ever been a cop?
Excuse me?
Have you ever been a cop?
I have not been a police officer. I was a prosecutor.
Yeah, so you don't have decades of law enforcement experience, but you said you worked with law enforcement, right? That's fair to say, right?
I was a prosecutor for over 20 years
You
in
worked
5
with-
different
you worked-
offices.
You worked with law enforcement. You weren't law enforcement. So is it common for ATF to turn off the power to a location prior to executing a search warrant?
Is it common for us to do that?
Yeah.
I do not believe it is a common thing that we do.
You're the director. You either know it is common or you don't know whether it's common.
I thought I answered the question. I'm sorry.
Is it common?
My understanding is it's not common, and I want to be very careful to say I'm not commenting on any case because I'm not sure until the facts come in.
Did I ask you about a specific case, sir? I did not, did I? I asked you about policy. You just said it's not common. Next, does the ATF use RF frequency jamming technology to prevent the internet and cell phones from working?
Sir, I'm sorry.
Does the ATF use RF frequency jamming technology to prevent the internet and cell phones from working during the execution of a search warrant?
Again, I am not going to sit here, and I guess I maybe should have said this before, and comment on the tactics that we use when we go into dangerous places, because it provides a blueprint for criminals to hurt us.
Let's get this straight then. You told us you won't answer anything specifically about a case. Now you're saying you're not going to tell us generically.
We could maybe we can contact your staff in private setting and have a conversation instead of broadcasting for all the criminals.
Does the ATF use dynamic entry as their means for entry during the execution of a search warrant? Does the ATF still use dynamic entry as their means for entry during the execution of a search warrant?
I don't think it's appropriate. We can communicate with you on these kinds of training issues. I just don't want to give a public blueprint for people tomorrow and the next day who are going to be facing law enforcement through the door to know how we're coming, what we're doing.
Do you assess pattern of life as a part of risk assessment conducted prior to executing a search warrant? Can you answer that?
I think that's
one?
far enough afield that I could say, depending on the case, we can assess pattern of life at times, of course. Depends on the case, right? Some cases it's appropriate, some cases it's not. These are I don't do this, right? The career law enforcement people, as you pointed out, do this with decades of experience. I don't armchair quarterback them either.
But here's the deal. You're the director. And I would expect that you would know what the policy is. And it looks to me, you've convinced me that maybe Mr. Nels was right. I'm not sure that I thought he was right. But you didn't want to tell us specifically about the Malinowski case. I got that. I think it's wrong. I think it's a false narrative. But then when I start asking you about policies, generic policies, now all of a sudden you don't want to answer those.
Mr.
So
Congress,
when you coordinate with local law enforcement you do coordinate with local law enforcement prior to the execution of a search warrant?
in most cases, yes. Certainly, most of our cases we're doing shoulder to shoulder with law enforcement.
So
in
these
a
are
local
yes or no
jurisdiction.
questions. Thank you for answering yes. Is it the ATF's